How's it going, YouTube? This is Brain here, curator of the Zombie Farm Archive, and today I've got something very exciting to share with all of you. We've recently surpassed 100 subscribers here on YouTube, and I wanted to arrange something special for y'all as a way to celebrate the milestone. As such, I got into contact with the creator of Zombie Farm, Vince McDonnell, and asked if he'd be willing to partake in a Zombie Farm Q&A. To my excitement, Vince got back to me soon after and had agreed to do so. After receiving the go-ahead from Vince, I posted an announcement to the Zombie Farm Archive on Discord and set up a submissions channel to gather questions from members within our community. Upon reviewing all of the submissions, I compiled a list of 10 questions from the lot which I felt were the most appropriate to send Vince's way. After a little while, Vince got back to me with the list of responses, and they are incredibly thorough. To say I'm stoked would be an understatement. So without further delay, let's see Vince's answers to your questions. Before I get into reading the responses, I would just like to apologize in advance if I end up mispronouncing any of your usernames. Jumping in at number 1, Gulo Mengozi asks, how did you originally come up with Zombie Farm? Vince responds, my wife Susan played a lot of Farmville back in 2009. She influenced me, and I got hooked. But when I was away from my PC and couldn't check my crops, I found myself wishing that there was a mobile version available. When I found out there was none and nothing like it available, I thought that maybe I could attempt to make one. One thing that I wished for in Farmville was another macro goal to complement crop farming. I then thought that perhaps you could grow troops for a battle game. The more I thought of it, the more it made sense to go with zombies for this, since crops and zombies both go in the ground. At number 2, Gulo Mengozi asks, what is the story behind Tim Buckwheat, and why did you choose to make him the first friend of every Zombie Farm player? Vince responds, we had an avid fan in Sweden that was on the forums all the time. He would moderate the community on his own and do all sorts of helpful stuff for us. Susan and I thought that maybe we could officially hire this person and bring him to California, so we really tried. We were looking into sponsoring a visa, but unfortunately it didn't pan out. We bought him a ticket so he could at least visit the studio, which he did, but just to visit. He became our community manager and chose Tim Buckwheat as his name. I suppose he came up with that name thinking about what an American country farmer's name might be like. We eventually used that same helpful character when we had to design a tutorial character for Zombie Farm. At number 3, Friendly Chemist asks, what were you doing in life at the time you created Zombie Farm? What were your initial expectations and how have things changed since? Vince responds, at the time, I recently quit my full-time job as a game developer at a big company working on console games, Xbox, PlayStation 2, etc. The environment at that time was actually pretty brutal. I wanted a change, so I aspired to be a mobile developer, not necessarily in games. I was newly married and living out of my savings at the time while making a few apps for the iPhone, which was very new back then. After a few apps that had modest results, I decided to go back to my roots and try to make a game. That's when I started on Zombie Farm. I was at the end of my savings, so at that time, my expectations were quite simple. I just needed some income to pay my rent and feed my family. It eventually went gangbusters and totally changed our lives. At number 4, I Don't Know 1456 asks, why was Dina Co. chosen to port Zombie Farm to Android, and what was it like working with them? Vince responds, there were actually many different companies interested in doing the Android port. At the time, our goal was to focus on iOS games in the studio since our core skills were iOS based, and the Android market was not as developed as the iOS market. Dina seemed like the best choice. They had a track record of success and were well funded. They invited us to Japan for a few business trips, which was cool. It was actually very nice working with them. At number 5, MilX asks, were there any zombie abilities or designs that got scrapped and never made it to Zombie Farm? Vince responds, I can't recall any abilities being cut, but we did have a zombie type that never made it. It was another play on words called Zombaby. I didn't quite like it because at the time, dead baby jokes were prevalent, and I thought they were in poor taste. I did not want Zombie Farm to be associated with that stuff, so I decided to remove it entirely. At number 6, Water Bottle asks, is there anything you regret adding to Zombie Farm or doing with Zombie Farm? Vince responds, yes, there were a few. One of them was splitting Zombie Farm into the classic version and Zombie Farm 2. In hindsight, we should have just kept them as one single app. We unfortunately ended up splitting the player base. At number 7, Squish asks, did you go to school to learn game development or were you self-taught? Vince responds, I knew I wanted to make games when I was a kid, but where I was from and at the time, there was no real path to get there. I had a buddy in elementary school back in the late 80s, and we taught ourselves some basic coding to make rudimentary ASC2 games. I later went to college and sought out a software developer degree, knowing that would be at least a step closer to my career goal as a game developer. When I migrated to the USA, I landed a job as a game tester, later became a game scripter, then a game engineer. I had passable basic skills, but a lot of actual willpower. I kind of just learned actual game development on the fly. At number 8, Mr. Anonymous asks, will you ever make another Zombie Farm game one day? Vince responds, I think that's one thing I sometimes think about. I would like to if I had the resources and the time. It would be fun to make a modern day version of it, maybe someday in the future. At number 9, Brain asks, what was your personal favorite game you created during your time in the Playforge and why? Vince responds, probably Tree World. It was so bite-sized, so simple, and the design just worked out so well on the first try. I like that game because it took the least number of iterations to make. It just came together nicely and surprisingly fast. And last but certainly not least, at number 10, Mr. Anonymous asks, how's life? Vince responds, life has treated me well. Nowadays I tend to focus more on my family, but still, my love for making games is well and alive, and I think making games will always be a part of me. It's something I would like to pass on to my kid. Recently I've gone back to my console dev roots. Here I am making Goblin Stone, and like Zombie Farm, it's another game about a bunch of little green creatures. It's a very ambitious project for a very small team. For the past few years, all my energy has been poured into this game. I think I'm just fortunate to have the opportunity to make games together with my wife and maybe someday with my kid. I would like to personally thank Vince for taking the time to look through and respond to each of these questions so thoroughly. It's not often you come across a game developer as communicative as Vince has been, and taking into consideration how much he has going on, getting to hear all of this insight from him in any capacity is greatly appreciated. I highly encourage y'all to go check out Vince's new game, Goblin Stone, which will be seeing an early access launch during the third quarter of this year. I'll have an invite link to their Discord server in the description below. Before I wrap up here, I'd like to thank all of you who've helped this project grow into what it's become today. When I started this project in early January of this year, I did so simply because I wanted to play Zombie Farm 2 again and make it available to anyone else who shared that sentiment. I never anticipated that it'd receive this much support so quickly. Thanks to all of your contributions, we've managed to archive every known release of Zombie Farm 2, as well as numerous releases of the classic Zombie Farm. On top of that, lots of lost content has been dug up and restored to these games in the form of ZFR and ZF2R, thanks to many of the brilliant minds who've joined us along the way. Who knows, maybe with enough support Zombie Farm could make a full comeback someday. Until then, all we can do is continue to archive and try to build upon what we can get our hands on. So whether you're here to contribute to the project or simply here to relive some good old days, thank you all for helping this project thrive. Thanks for stopping by, y'all.